I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Warren Claiborne sat in his Dallas high-rise office, the glow of his monitor casting shadows across his face as his fingers moved across the keyboard. Outside, the Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, but he barely noticed. His focus was on the browser tab, displaying flight options to Atlanta. He clicked purchase on a first-class ticket. A small smile crossed his weathered face as he imagined Delaney's reaction. They hadn't seen each other in weeks, her art gallery work in Atlanta and his consulting business in Dallas, creating a distance that felt more than just geographical. Warren leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. At 38, he'd built his cybersecurity empire from nothing. Growing up in Oklahoma with parents who could barely keep the lights on, he'd started working at 15, putting himself through college, grinding his way up. Every dollar earned felt like a middle finger to poverty. His phone buzzed. "Mara, you still at the office?" His sister's text read. "Just finishing," he replied, then added, "Booked a surprise trip to Atlanta for Thanksgiving. Going to see Delaney at her parents'." Three dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, surprises backfire, bro call first. Warren frowned. Mara had always been protective, too protective, since their childhood. She'd joined the Army while he went to tech school, both of them escaping their upbringing in different ways. "It'll be fine," he texted back. He closed his laptop and walked to the window. The skyline of Dallas spread before him, a vista he'd earned through years of brutal work hours and calculated risks. Warren thought about Delaney's studio apartment when they'd first met, how she'd struggled with student loans and credit card debt. He'd paid it all off, just like he'd covered her mother's medical bills when cancer struck, and most recently, cleared $58,000 of new credit card debt she'd somehow accumulated. That had been 3 months ago. Since then, something had shifted between them. Their phone calls grew shorter, her excuses for staying in Atlanta longer, more elaborate. This trip wasn't just about Thanksgiving, it was about reclaiming what was slipping away. "Time to go home," he muttered to himself. The next morning, Warren was on the flight to Atlanta. The cabin was nearly empty due to the early hour. He ordered coffee, black, and reviewed some contract proposals on his tablet. Work always centered him. It was the one thing in life that followed logical rules: input equaled output. Effort yielded results. People were messier. Delaney was messier, that he remembered the day they met, at a gallery opening in Austin. She'd been describing her installation to a disinterested collector when Warren had stepped in. The interplay of light against texture creates a dialogue about vulnerability, he'd said, surprising himself with the insight. The way she'd looked at him, then like he was a puzzle box she wanted to unlock. Now he wondered if she'd solved him too easily and grown bored of what she found. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Folks, we've got some weather systems over the southeast. Expect turbulence and possible delays." Warren took a sip of his coffee. A delay wouldn't matter. He had nowhere else to be. 13 hours later, Warren stood in the arrivals terminal at Atlanta International, his patience worn thin. The weather systems had turned into a full storm, forcing them to circle for hours before being diverted to Birmingham, where they'd waited for clearance to continue to Atlanta. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Mara. He texted her, "Landed. All good." Warren grabbed his carry-on and headed to the rental car counter. The roads were still slick from the storm, and darkness had fallen hours ago. As he navigated through Atlanta's suburbs toward the Trent's house, fatigue pulled at him. But beneath it was a determination that had carried him through every obstacle life had thrown in his path. The Trents lived in a picture-perfect colonial in a quiet neighborhood. White columns framed the entrance, and warm light spilled from the windows. Warren parked across the street, checked his appearance in the rearview mirror, and grabbed the bouquet of roses he'd picked up at the airport. Standing on the porch, he took a deep breath and knocked. Footsteps approached. The door swung open. Delaney stood there, wearing a burgundy sweater dress he didn't recognize. For a split second, something flashed in her eyes: shock, fear, anger. It vanished so quickly he almost thought he'd imagined it. "Warren." Her voice was tight. "What are you doing here?" "Surprise," he said, holding out the roses. "Thought I'd join you for Thanksgiving." Delaney stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. Her smile looked pasted on. You should have called. Wanted to surprise you, he repeated, the bouquet still extended between them. She didn't take the flowers. You shouldn't be here. Surprises are for people who belong. Her words fell between them like ice cubes. Warren stood frozen, arms still extended, as Delaney turned around and walked back inside. The door clicking shut behind her, he stood there, the roses hanging limply in his hand. Through the window, he could see figures moving, Delaney talking animatedly to someone, gesturing toward the door. Her father, Reverend Trent, appeared in the frame. Looking concerned. 10 minutes later, a security car pulled up. Two men in uniforms approached respectfully. Sir, the taller one said, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Warren looked at him steadily. My wife is inside. Yes, sir, and she's requested that you leave. I'm sorry, but this is private property. Warren studied the man's face, noticing the discomfort there. This wasn't the first domestic situation he'd been called to handle. Fine, Warren said finally, turning away. He dropped the roses into a shrub and walked back to his rental car without looking back. The hotel room was anonymous beige walls, standard-issue furniture, a print of the Atlanta skyline that could have been in any tourist pamphlet. Warren stood at the window, looking out at the real skyline, lights blinking in the darkness. His phone buzzed. Mara, you okay? Warren didn't respond immediately. Instead, he opened his laptop and logged into his accounts. First, he accessed the joint savings account he shared with Delaney. She'd been added as a beneficiary 2 years ago. With a few keystrokes, he transferred the entire balance, $127,000, to his personal business account. Next, he logged into the credit card portal. He was the primary holder on all their cards. He canceled the secondary card tied to Delaney's name. Then he froze the accounts. The investment portfolio he'd set up in both their names took longer to adjust, but 20 minutes later, her access was revoked. Last, he canceled the standing order for her gallery's rent in Atlanta, a gift he'd been providing to help her pursue her artistic dreams. Only then did he respond to Mara, I'm fine. Need the name of your divorce attorney. His phone rang immediately. He answered. What happened? Mara's voice was sharp with concern. She had security remove me from her parents' property, Warren said, his voice flat. Said surprises are for people who belong. Jesus, Warren. I'm sorry. A pause. You sure about this? Maybe there's an explanation. Don't need one, he replied. Get the legal team ready. It's time to close this chapter properly. Okay, I'll call Davis in the morning. Another pause. You want me to come down there? Not yet. Handle things from Dallas. I'll be back tomorrow. After hanging up, Warren stared at his phone. No calls or messages from Delaney. No explanation, no apology. He lay down on the bed, fully clothed, hands folded across his chest, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come, but that was fine. Warren had learned long ago that rest was a luxury, not a necessity. And right now, there was work to be done. The first call came at 6:17 a.m. Warren was already awake, showered, and dressed in a fresh suit from his overnight bag. He watched Delaney's name flash on his phone screen, let it ring 4 times, then answered. Warren, what the hell? Her voice was shrill with panic. My cards are all declined. The gallery account is empty. What are you doing? He kept his voice level. You want a distance. You got it. This is insane. I need that money for the gallery showing next week. The caterers, not my problem anymore. Warren, stop this. You can't just. I can. I did. Anything else? A long pause filled with ragged breathing. We need to talk about this like adults. We're past talking, Warren said. Check your email in an hour. He hung up. The second call came from his lawyer, Davis, 30 minutes later. Mara, fill me in, he said. I've drawn up preliminary paperwork. Filing grounds, financial exploitation, Warren said. Emotional abandonment, and whatever else will stick. Basic evidence for both. Warren outlined the financial support he'd provided, the debt he'd covered, the recent credit card activity. He'd discovered charges at hotels he'd never visited, restaurants in cities he'd never been to. She's having an affair, he added. Davis was silent for a moment. That changes things. We can add adultery. Georgia's a mixed state. They consider fault in property division. Good. I want everything. We'll need proof of the affair for the court. Warren's laugh was cold. Give me an hour. Delaney's email and cloud storage passwords hadn't changed in years. Warren had set them up initially, and she'd never bothered to create new ones. People were careless that way, thinking their digital lives were secure through sheer optimism. IT took him less than 5 minutes to access her accounts. The evidence was abundant and damning. Email exchanges with someone named Ezra Boone, filled with intimate details and plans for meetups. Photos in her cloud storage her and a man with artistic stubble and carefully disheveled hair in various locations. Hotel selfies. Beach photos. One particularly painful image of them in a restaurant Warren recognized he'd taken her there for her birthday last year. The timestamps told their own story. The affair had been going on for months, predating her extended stay in Atlanta. Warren downloaded everything methodically, organizing it into folders with clear labels. He checked the credit card statements again, matching dates and locations with the emails and photos. The narrative emerged with brutal clarity. She'd used the money he'd given her to clear her debts to finance her affair. Instead, he forwarded the entire package to Davis. His phone rang again. Delaney, I got the divorce papers, she said, her voice thick. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly think. I don't think, Warren interrupted. I know. Know what? About Ezra Boone. The silence on the other end was deafening. How did you? Doesn't matter. What matters is the court will know too. Warren, please. It's not what you think. Save it for the judge, he said, and hung up. That afternoon, Warren received a text from an unknown number. We should talk. About Delaney. I have information you might want. Sloan Walker. Warren recognized the name immediately. Delaney's best friend since college. They'd never been close. Sloan had always seemed to regard him with a mixture of envy and disdain. Though she'd hide it beneath effusive compliments about his success, he replied, What information? Not over text. Meet me? Rooftop bar at Hotel Indigo, 7 p.m. Warren considered. It could be a trap, some attempt by Delaney to gather evidence of erratic behavior. But his curiosity won out. I'll be there, he texted back. The rooftop bar offered a panoramic view of Atlanta's skyline. Warren arrived 15 minutes early, selected a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, and ordered sparkling water. Sloan arrived at precisely 7 p.m. She wore a sleek black pantsuit and carried herself with the calculated confidence of someone who'd practiced her walk in front of mirrors. Her smile, when she spotted him, was like a predator spotting potential prey. Warren, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Thanks for meeting me. He nodded once. You said you have information. Direct as always. She signaled the waiter. Gin martini, very dry, 3 olives. She turned back to Warren. What I have is worth something. Depends what it is. Sloan leaned forward. Delaney's been planning this for nearly a year. Planning what? The divorce. The affair. All of it. She took the martini the waiter delivered and sipped it. She wanted to leave you, but not before she got as much as she could. Warren's face remained impassive. Proof. Sloan pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. Read the messages. Warren scrolled through a series of texts between Sloan and Delaney, dating back months. His jaw tightened as he read. He's so intense all the time. I feel like I can't breathe. Delaney, so leave him. Sloan, not until I'm financially secure. Working on it. Delaney, more recent messages were more explicit. He says I should push W to a breaking point. Make him seem unstable. Better for court. Delaney, smart, but dangerous. He's not the type to just collapse. Sloan, everyone has a trigger. I'll find his. Delaney. Warren handed the phone back. Why show me this? Sloan's smile didn't reach her eyes. Let's just say I'm tired of playing second fiddle to Delaney. Always the sidekick, never the star. She sipped her martini. And there's more where that came from. Recordings. Emails. Plans they made to use your money to start a new gallery together. What do you want? A percentage of whatever you get in the settlement. She shrugged. Call it a finder's fee. Warren studied her. You're assuming I'll get a favorable settlement. With what I can give you. It's guaranteed. Warren took a sip of his water. Send everything to this email, he said, sliding a business card across the table. If it's useful, You'll be compensated. I want a contract. You'll get my word. Take it or leave it. Sloan hesitated, then nodded. Fine. As she stood to leave, Warren added, Don't mistake me for desperate, Sloan. You're useful. That's all. Her smile faltered. We'll see who needs who when this is over. Back in his hotel room, Warren reviewed the material Sloan had sent. It was damning voice recordings of Delaney and Ezra discussing how to manipulate the divorce proceedings, screenshots of financial planning for their new life together, even a photo of a list in Delaney's handwriting titled Assets to Target. He forwarded everything to Davis with a brief message. Change of plans. I want to file a civil suit for marital fraud alongside the divorce. Davis called immediately. Marital fraud? That's ambitious. But possible. With this evidence? Yes. But it's a scorched earth approach, Warren. There's no coming back from this. Warren looked out at the Atlanta skyline, lights blinking in the darkness. I don't want to come back. I want her to understand what she's done. It'll get ugly. Public. Good. After hanging up, Warren booked a flight back to Dallas for the following morning. There was nothing more for him in Atlanta now. The wheels were in motion. His phone buzzed with a text from Delaney. Please call me. We need to talk. I can explain everything. Warren deleted the message without responding. Another text arrived, this one from Mara. How are you holding up? Fine, he replied. Coming home tomorrow. First court date set for next week. I'll pick you up at the airport. And Warren? Try to get some sleep. He didn't reply to that. Sleep seemed like a distant concept, belonging to another life. Instead, he opened his laptop and began a new document. Title: Claiborne versus Claiborne, Evidence of Marital Fraud. With methodical precision, he began organizing the evidence, creating a timeline of betrayal that would leave no room for sympathy. The Dallas County Courthouse loomed against the bright morning sky, its stone facade imposing and indifferent to the human dramas that played out inside. Warren stood on the steps, adjusting his tie. Beside him, Mara's presence was solid and reassuring. You ready for this? She asked. Warren nodded once. Been ready since Atlanta. Inside, they met Davis and his team in a conference room. The lawyer looked up from his notes, his expression carefully professional. They've requested a private meeting before we start, Davis said. Delaney, her lawyer, and her parents. Your call. Warren considered for a moment. What's their angle? Probably looking for a settlement. Avoid the publicity. Fine. I'll hear them out. 15 minutes later, Warren sat across a polished table from Delaney, who'd lost weight since he'd last seen her. Her eyes were shadowed, her hands fidgeting with a tissue. Beside her sat a sharp-featured woman in a tailored suit, her attorney. Reverend Trent and Maeve sat slightly behind, the former's face a mask of righteous indignation, the latter's creased with anxiety. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Delaney's lawyer began. My client is willing to offer a fair division of assets in exchange for dropping the civil suit. Warren said nothing, waiting. This needn't become a public spectacle, she continued. A simple, quiet divorce would be in everyone's best interests. And what would this fair division look like? Davis asked. Ms. Claiborne will relinquish claims to the Dallas property and the investment portfolio. In exchange, Mr. Claiborne will maintain her gallery funding for 1 year and provide a lump sum of $200,000. Warren almost laughed. No. Delaney leaned forward. Warren, please. Let me be clear, he interrupted. There will be no settlement. No deals. The civil suit proceeds as planned. Reverend Trent spoke up, his voice carrying the measured cadence of the pulpit. Young man, I understand you're hurt, but this vindictiveness serves no one. The Christian path is forgiveness. Warren turned his cold gaze to the Reverend. Funny, your daughter didn't seem interested in Christian values when she was spending my money on hotel rooms with her lover. Maeve gasped. Delaney's face flushed. That's enough, her lawyer snapped. If you won't consider a reasonable settlement, we have nothing more to discuss. On that, we agree, Warren said, standing. See you in court. The courtroom was smaller than Warren had expected, the wood paneling giving it a claustrophobic feel. He sat at the plaintiff's table with Davis, their evidence neatly arranged before them. Across the aisle, Delaney kept her eyes down. The gallery seats were sparsely filled with a few legal interns. a couple of courthouse regulars. Sloane sat in the back row, her expression eager. Mara had positioned herself directly behind Warren, close enough that he could occasionally feel her presence like a physical shield at his back. Judge Eleanor Hargrove entered, a thin woman with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes. After the formalities, Davis began his opening statement. Your Honor, this is not merely a divorce case. This is a case of calculated, systematic marital fraud. We will present evidence that Mrs. Claiborne entered into financial agreements with my client under false pretenses, used his assets to conduct and finance an extramarital affair, and conspired to manipulate divorce proceedings to her advantage through emotional manipulation and deception. Warren watched the judge's face as Davis laid out the timeline, the debts he'd paid, the affair that had already been in progress, the planning revealed in Sloane's evidence. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened at key points. Delaney's attorney countered with emotional appeals, painting Warren as controlling and emotionally unavailable, suggesting that Delaney had sought connection elsewhere only after feeling trapped in a loveless marriage. Mrs. Claiborne made mistakes, Your Honor, but she was driven to them by circumstances. Mr. Claiborne's financial support came with strings expectations of gratitude and compliance that stifled my client's autonomy and self-expression. The judge's questions were pointed and specific, cutting through rhetoric to focus on facts. Counselor, does your client deny the affair with Mr. Boone? No, Your Honor, but does she deny using funds provided by Mr. Claiborne to finance activities related to this affair? The characterization is misleading. Please answer the question directly. A pause. No, Your Honor. The morning proceeded with methodical presentation of evidence. Bank records, credit card statements, email exchanges. The recordings and messages from Sloane were particularly damaging, revealing premeditation that contradicted Delaney's claims of impulsive actions born of emotional distress. During a brief recess, Warren stepped into the hallway for water. Reverend Trent approached, his face flushed with anger. You're destroying her, he said, his voice low but intense. Is that what you want? To leave nothing behind? Warren met his gaze steadily. Your daughter made her choices. I'm just making sure she owns them. This isn't justice. It's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Maeve appeared at her husband's elbow, her face tear-streaked. Please, Warren, whatever Delaney did, this public humiliation. Mrs. Trent, Warren interrupted gently. I paid for your cancer treatments 3 years ago because Delaney asked me to. I never mentioned it, never held it over her head. That's the man I am. His voice hardened. The woman your daughter is? She took the money I gave her to clear her debts and use it to finance hotel rooms where she cheated on me. So forgive me if I don't feel particularly concerned about sparing her public humiliation. He walked back into the courtroom without waiting for their response. The judge's ruling came down 2 days later. Warren sat perfectly still as she delivered it, her voice clear and clinical. In the matter of Claiborne versus Claiborne, regarding the petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial exploitation, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Warren didn't look at Delaney. Furthermore, regarding the civil claim of marital fraud, the court finds substantial evidence of deliberate deception for financial gain. The defendant is hereby ordered to repay the sum of $58,000, the amount fraudulently obtained for debt clearance plus legal fees. A small gasp came from Delaney's side of the room. The court grants the divorce and orders the division of property as follows. Mr. Claiborne retains full ownership of all properties, investments, and business interests established during the marriage. Mrs. Claiborne forfeits all claims to these assets due to the nature and extent of her deception. The judge continued with technical details, but Warren had heard what he needed. It was done. Completely. Definitively done. As the courtroom began to clear, Sloane approached him, a calculating smile on her face. Congratulations, she said. I'd say that went well. Warren regarded her coolly. Your information was useful. About our arrangement. There was no arrangement, Sloane. Just your word against mine. Her smile faltered. But you said, I said if it was useful, you'd be compensated. He handed her an envelope. $5,000. More than fair. Her face darkened. The evidence I gave you was worth millions in the settlement. And your betrayal of your friend was worth what? Exactly. Warren asked quietly. You didn't help me out of righteousness, Sloane. You did it out of jealousy and greed. The money's a courtesy, not an obligation. She stared at him, then at the envelope. Finally, she snatched it from his hand. You're as cold as she said you were. Probably colder, Warren agreed. Good day, Sloane. Outside the courthouse, Warren stood with Mara in the bright sunlight. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to peace, not happiness, but the quiet that comes after a storm passes. You didn't just win, Mara said, studying his face. You scorched the earth. Warren nodded. I didn't come for mercy. What now? Back to work. The Johnson account needs attention, and there's that new security protocol to implement. Mara frowned. That's it? Back to business? What else is there? She didn't have an answer for that. As they walked toward the parking lot, Warren spotted Ezra Boone leaning against a column, smoking nervously. Their eyes met briefly. Warren saw fear there. The affair had been exposed publicly, and Ezra's reputation in the art world was already suffering collateral damage. Good. Delaney emerged from the courthouse minutes later, her parents flanking her protectively. She looked small between them, diminished. When she saw Warren watching, she stopped. For a moment, he thought she might approach him. Instead, she turned away, hurrying toward a waiting It was the last time he would see her in person. 3 weeks later, Warren sat in his Dallas office, reviewing quarterly projections. Life had settled back into its predictable rhythms. Work, home, sleep, repeat. If there was an emptiness in the routine, he chose not to examine it too closely. His assistant knocked lightly on the door. Mr. Claiborne? The paperwork you requested is ready for your signature. Warren took the folder she offered. Inside was a donation agreement, a substantial sum directed to a nonprofit specializing in helping women escape financial abuse. The amount matched exactly what he'd once paid to clear Delaney's debts. His assistant hesitated. Sir, the board wanted me to confirm this is quite a large donation. It's correct, Warren said, signing the document with a firm stroke. The amount is non-negotiable. After she left, Warren stood and walked to the window. The Dallas skyline spread before him, a testament to human ambition and persistence. His empire, built from nothing but raw determination and refusal to accept defeat. He thought about Delaney, briefly her laugh, the way she'd once looked at him with something that had seemed like love. The memory was already fading, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. Warren wasn't broken. He wasn't even particularly regretful. He was simply finished with her, with that chapter of his life. The donation wasn't about forgiveness. It was about balance, closing accounts in his own way. Night fell over the city, lights blinking on across the skyline. Warren remained at the window, alone with his thoughts, facing forward to whatever came next.